So I'm down here in New Jersey visiting family this weekend. I know it's been a little while since I've done any videos from the old homestead here, but spring is among us, and it's only a matter of time before everything you see here is completely engulfed in greenery, and also before the poison ivy takes over all the vines on this fence. So I have to try and get down here and do this now, because as soon as that poison ivy starts coming in, I'll start getting rashes from it. I'm very allergic to poison ivy, always have been. But nonetheless, I wanted to come down here and make this video for you guys to show you a couple more family heirlooms that I don't think I've ever discussed on camera before, kind of like a well-kept secret. A couple of gems that were preserved, or that we hung on to after my grandfather sold the farm. And I used to take care of the old farm lane here when I was still living here, and I had my garden tractors here, because I used to use this as a path to get out, to the woods, to ride the tractors through the woods. And ever since I moved away 3 years ago, nobody's really been maintaining it. So I came through here back in December with my uncle's tractor and the brush hog, and just kind of cut everything down and pushed some dead branches out of the way. But it doesn't get used much anymore, like I said. But I figure if nothing else, I can at least use this as storage space for some more junk. And at this point, it wouldn't surprise me if I end up having to push the part 60 back here at some point. My uncle is in the process of liquidating his farm property and possibly selling out, so that's another story for another day. But so I figured I would take some of the help him free up some space, get rid of some of the equipment in his yard, and I figured this would be a good spot to store it all down here. At least I know it's out of the way. But these were 3 farm attachments or farm implements that my grandfather used on his farm for many years. Each of these have seen thousands of hours behind one of the tractors that I still own, either the Ford 4000 or the John Deere 60. And my grandfather was not really one to get rid of stuff, like I've said in the past, so he hung on to these after he sold the farm. And in hindsight, I'm glad he did, because my girlfriend and I are, at some point, once we settle down and we get some land, we would like to start up our own little hobby vegetable farm to kind of carry on the old family tradition. My grandfather purchased this tract of land you see here, which is now a subdivision, in 1951, and that's where he kind of settled down. That's where my mom and her brothers were raised, and that's where, or that's one of the areas, I should say, where my, love for farming and agriculture really took off. And, as a 23-year-old man in 1951, he took out a bank loan. He purchased a 105-acre tract of land, which was a dairy farm that he converted into some very fertile vegetable growing ground with the plow you see right here. And with that bank loan, he also went to one of the local John Deere dealerships, Fred Sickler and Son, in Sicklerville, New Jersey, and he purchased a John Deere A with a single front wheel and 42-inch rears. That was his very first tractor that he kind of got him going, got his farming business off the ground when he went on his own. And as a young man in his early 20s, I mean, that's all he really had to work with, that tractor and all the implements that he purchased with it, which include, but are not limited to, this John Deere RW 8-foot disc, or cut harrow as we call it here in South Jersey. I always grew up calling them a cut harrow, and most of the people around here still use that term. I don't really know where it came from, but if somebody uses the word, or uses the term cut harrow, they're most likely from South Jersey or somewhere along the Mason-Dixon line. But like I said, he bought the RW 8-footer there. He bought this John Deere 44H 2-bottom hydraulic plow. And then a few years later, once my uncles got to be of age, he purchased this John Deere VanBrunt grain drill, Model B grain drill, from a farm auction about 10 minutes down the road. So that one didn't come around until later in life. But the plow and the disc here, or cut harrow, or the they have kind of a special story behind them, and these were things that he never really wanted to get rid of. So someday when I'm settled down in my own piece of property and I have a shop and I have the land to actually put these things to work, I will take the time to take them apart, fix them up the right way, and repaint them and make them look nice. And I mean, it kind of goes without saying, I have to get these fixed up to look good behind the 60 that's going to be pulling them again, because the 60 was the tractor that pulled these 2 implements for many years. I mean, that was his main work tractor for many years. And the 8-foot disc here, cut harrow, that you see was a pretty good match for the 60. I mean, it's definitely small by today's standards, but what's interesting about this disc is it actually broke. It when my uncle was a teenager, he actually managed to break one of the bull gears in the rear end on the 60 while he was pulling this disc. They had just plowed up a vegetable field a couple miles down the road on a pretty sandy farm, and so the soil was real light and fluffy, which, you know, makes the tractor bite pretty hard, makes it pull a little bit harder, which is contrary to what you would think. But in vegetable ground, you know, vegetable farming, when you're doing your tillage at the end of the season, you want to try and turn all that crop residue completely over, which means you have to dig as deep as possible. So the soil that you're bringing up to the top is usually pretty light and fluffy, and with the sandy soil we have down here in this region, I mean, that's going to make the tractor spin a little bit and pull a little bit harder. So the story goes he was pulling this disc through a pretty fluffy sandy field, and it got to the point where the tractor started slowing down, and then it just stopped, and you know, he was dead in the field. He tried, you know, he tried driving it in every single gear, and the thing just wouldn't go. The engine would bog, but the tractor wouldn't go. So they had to call the dealership. The dealership came and towed it out of the field, and then they took it into their shop and spent probably a good month or two. They had it all split apart to replace the bull gears in the rear end, or at least one of the bull gears. So this disc is kind of known for that. That's a story that my uncle brings up pretty frequently. And this is just, you know, it's a classic example of a piece of American-made iron, and especially one that was owned by a New Jersey vegetable farmer, because you can see some of the custom modifications, the custom reinforcements that have been made to this thing over the years. She definitely shows signs of wear and tear. And one thing that's interesting about the old John Deere implements, whether it was a disc or called a mulcher, with this tube frame assembly, they never had bushings or any kind of bearings for the shafts, the framework to pivot on. So you literally just pumped grease into this kind of housing here. It looks like a bearing housing, but it's just the two metal surfaces together, and that's it. And you can see how that kind of took its toll on the framework. You see how worn it is. But I mean, their theory was as long as you kept them all greased, you know, it should last a long time. But it kind of goes without saying, this thing has definitely seen better days. You can see how it's been patched and welded from time to time, and there's a few pieces missing to it. I mean, a lot of the mud, you know, shields and guards are missing, are broken. The disc blades are obviously worn. They're all going to need to be replaced, and it looks like my grandfather replaced one of the front discs with one that was a little too big, so I'm guessing he just used whatever he had laying around. But I did have to put two new, or well, not new, but newer 15-inch tires on this thing just to pull it to 2.5 miles down the road to get it here. But this thing had been sitting for so long. I mean, these three implements here have been sitting here probably 50 years without being used. So I'm kind of, I can't say I'm too surprised that the tires at least needed to be replaced. But these things are pretty simple, as you can tell. I mean, the spools, that'll all come apart. I think everything really just needs to be rebearinged and repacked with grease. So it wouldn't take much to get this thing restored and into good working shape again. But that's a project for, you know, another day when I actually have some land that I can work with it. You can see this is it's set up for hydraulic lift, obviously. I have one cylinder that's mounted on the plow over here, but when the time comes, I'll get cylinders for all three of them. I'd like to try and find original John Deere lift cylinders, but I know they're worth a pretty penny these days. But yeah, like I said, the disc so far I haven't really done anything with besides grease the hell out of the wheel bearings and replace the tires. And then the 44H 2-bottom plow that you see here, this was another implement that he purchased new with the John Deere A, like I said. And these are one of the more common plows John Deere built. Obviously, John Deere started out as a plow manufacturer, started out and established their name in making implements long before they even thought about, you know, building tractors. And the 44Hs were very common. For farmers around here in South Jersey that didn't have a lot of money, they were fairly cheap and affordable because there really weren't many guys, at least in the 50s and early 60s, there weren't many farmers around here that I know of that were plowing with 3 or 4 bottom plows. Everybody could just get by with a 2-bottom. Because you got to think, I mean, in this area, like I said, the farmers never really had a lot of money. A lot of them were starting out with Farmall AVs and, you know, Farmall H's and John Deere A's and 50s and 60s. So nobody really had big horsepower back then unless they were a big corporate vegetable farmer or, you know, dairy farmer or grain farmer or something like that. But you didn't really see too many 4s until later on when guys started to be able to afford bigger, higher horsepower tractors. So this did most of the plowing for many years. My grandfather used to plow, you know, with his vegetables. If he wanted to put in tomatoes or peppers or squash, I mean, he was always plowing as deep as he could go. So this is a 216 plow. It's two 16-inch bottoms with the scouring pads, which I thought were kind of neat. I've always called them scour pads anyway. You guys might have a different terminology for them. The one in the back is broken. I'm not really sure how that happened. I don't know if it was due to rust or what. I think somebody might have tightened down the carriage bolt a little too much. It looks like somebody had repainted it at some point. My grandfather wasn't really one for paint, but something like this, I mean, these things see a lot of abuse, and it wasn't uncommon for farmers to paint their mold boards at the end of the season just to keep them from rusting up, because that affects how well the plow, you know, scours once you got it in the ground. I have the hydraulic cylinder mounted on this one, like I said, or partially mounted. It's just kind of hanging there, but I don't have the hoses for it. I had to take that all apart. Everything actually works on this plow, though. I mean, everything is loosened up, as rusty as it looks. I did go through and grease the wheel bearings and a lot of the lift linkages and pivots. And I do have the other coulter assembly. You can see there's one mounted there. I have the other coulter, but my uncle is using it on his two-bottom 3-point mounted plow for the time being, so I'll have to get that from him at some point. But I mean, as you can see, at least as far as I can tell, it's pretty much all complete otherwise. And my goal, my long-term goal with this plow is to fix it all up nice and then take it to plow days behind the 60 once that gets completed. This plow will not be put behind the 520 if I can help it, because the 520 was never a plow tractor. It was only ever a cultivating tractor, and truthfully, it's restored way too nice for me to want to get it down and dirty like that. So the 60 will be the plow tractor eventually, not anytime soon, but once I get it finished and I can get the plow, you know, redone to match, I think we'll see a lot more plow days. So it's got good bones for sure, but probably get some new shares for it, replace the coulters, and just kind of go through it. I mean, there's really not much to these old plows. Everything, like I said, is freed up. Everything, you know, loosened up. Nothing really needed to be. I didn't have to spray any PB blaster or soak anything, so I guess that's a good sign. I get new wheel bearings for it. What's interesting is, as you can see, that it's still sporting the old school tires, the old Goodyear tires with the diamond sidewall, or at least the one on this side is. So these tires have been on for many years, and somehow I was able to get this trailer or get this plow pulled all the way down here without having to air the tires up. They've held there for so long. I don't really know how. It's kind of a miracle when you consider how long this thing sat, and you can see how dry cracked them tires are. But I had to, like I said, I had to replace the tires on the disc, but not on the plow. So I guess I got lucky there. But yeah, it pulled down the road just fine. So this will look good pulled behind the 60. I think it's actually still set up. The hitch is still set up for the 60 as well. But so that's another project for another day. And then over here we have the John Deere VanBrunt Model B grain drill. My grandfather actually did not purchase this one new. This came from a farm sale in the next town over, probably 10 minutes down the road. And he was out working a field the day that this actually sold at an auction. And he sent my uncle, who was like 13 or 14 at the time, over to the auction with the pickup truck to bid on it. And he ended up winning it, so he had to come back, grab the tractor, drive the tractor over there, and then bring this drill home. And my grandfather wasn't a grain farmer by any means. I mean, he did mostly vegetables, but he was known to, in his later years, he was known to do cover crops, mostly just wheat and soybeans. He would put food plots in for the deer, because they used to deer hunt all these backwoods here. And nowadays you'd look pretty foolish not putting a cover crop in the wintertime if you're not doing anything else. So he's, like I said, he used this for mostly soybeans and wheat. So I mean, it's been a while since it's been used, and he didn't put many hours on it himself, but it has potential. This is a 16-row unit, so all the row units are going to need to be gone through. As you can see, most of the seed tubes are in pretty poor shape. A few of them have been replaced here over the years, and there's a few that are missing. All the down pressure springs are shot, and it's been a minute since anything here has had grease. But what's cool about these old VanBrunt grain drills is that the hopper boxes are galvanized. So, I mean, they don't rust. My uncle has had this tarp over top of it for many years to try and keep water out of it and just keep it preserved. And he actually used this disc probably up until 25 or 30 years ago, because there was a couple seasons where he would plant cover crops in the winter as well. But I mean, needless to say, it's been sitting for a long time. So I figured, you know, these VanBrunt drills are pretty cool. I was actually I was thinking about maybe parting this one out, just because it would take a lot of time and money to get it back into fully working condition. But I don't know, maybe I'll find a use for it someday down the road. We come around to the front here, you can see the frame's all in good shape. I mean, the hitch tongue and everything's all there. It just really makes you appreciate the simplicity of these, you know, these old machines. I don't know much about drills myself, or at least the newer drills, but working for a farm equipment dealer the last couple of years, I got to see some much newer, bigger, and far more expensive drills coming in and getting pre-delivered and set up. And like I said, it makes me appreciate how simple the farmers had it back in the day. And there are plenty of guys that are still using these old VanBrunt drills just for doing food plots and stuff on their farms. So I really hate to scrap this thing or part it out. So I most likely will end up rebuilding it someday. It's just, you know, it's a matter of trying to cough up the money to go through each individual row unit and, you know, make it all like new again. But what I'd like to do someday is maybe start growing some kind of, you know, biofuel, like biodiesel crops such as canola or, you know, soybeans or something like that. But again, that all depends on whether I can actually obtain the land to do so. And then we'll have to go through and recondition all three of these pieces here. But I don't know. I mean, I can dream, but we'll see what the next decade brings. So for the time being, these three implements here are just going to sit in the lane where they're out of the way. They're, you know, kind of stored. I mean, I wish I could keep them all inside, but I can't really win there. But they're, you know, my uncle wanted them out of his property, otherwise they were just going to get scrapped. And I figured we have to preserve these because these are family-owned, you know, implements. They're family heirlooms that are symbolic of my grandfather's, you know, struggle, my grandfather's journey to put himself on the map as a vegetable farmer here. And these are the implements that literally worked this ground here for many decades. I almost forgot about these sitting here in the shed. I've had these sitting in here for probably 5 years or so just to keep them out of the elements. But these are some of the planter row units that my grandfather used to use for mostly for planting his winter cover crops years ago, soybeans and wheat. And I think for 1 or 2 seasons he also tried to use these to plant tomato seeds, like starting them from seed. But he wasn't one to start vegetables from seeds. Usually he would transplant, and that's how a lot of the vegetable farmers around here were. So he would start the seedlings in a greenhouse or in one of the packing house buildings or barns, or he would buy the seedlings already started from somebody else and then plant them or transplant them with the John Deere 50. But like I said, he used these row units here specifically for planting beans and wheat in the winter, and I don't really think they've seen a whole lot of use, to be honest with you. I don't know if he bought these new or not. I really don't know the story on them, but we have 2 John Deere Model 70 row units here, and I don't have a way to date them, except I know that they were made sometime between 1956 and 1968, judging by that logo. So these are pretty common. The 70 and 71 row units were made for a very long time. I think the 71s were made up into the early 2000s, and they were pretty similar in design, except I believe the 71s had a different style chain drive. So, I mean, there were some differences here and there over the years. But like I said, he used these mostly for cover crops, and unfortunately I don't have any of the plates for them, so I'll have to find some new plates if I ever want to use them again. My thinking was to maybe build a toolbar to hook them up to a Category 0 3-point hitch so I could, you know, pull them with one of the garden tractors. Because the original toolbar that we used to use to, you know, pull these with was either lost or stolen many years ago. So, I mean, finding another toolbar wouldn't be hard to do, but it would be cool to kind of custom make one to fit these behind a garden tractor and plant, you know, 2 rows at a time. You know, once I get the space to actually put in a decent sized garden plot. But they're both in pretty good shape. I mean, as with any planter row unit, you have to make sure your hoppers aren't rusted out from holding moisture, or in some cases holding fertilizer, as is the case with a lot of the 1-row Brindley planter units. But overall, these really aren't that bad. You can see they have the big rubber press wheels on them still, and they've got nice character too, for sure. So I'll probably fix these up someday, use them in the garden. Be nice if I could pull them with one of the 2 cylinders or one of the garden tractors, but I have to go through them and really see what they need. You can tell they were greased at least somewhat regularly. I think finding plates is going to be the biggest issue, because I'm not sure if you can still get them for these. So if anybody knows, please let me know. And then up here is an old Cole Planet Jr. I think he had a couple of these row units as well. These are actually still in production. The Cole Planter company is still, in business today, and truthfully, I don't think their design has changed a whole lot. But I'm not sure what he planned with these in particular. Looks like he's got C plates in that one. I'm not sure what they're for though. I'll have to check. But it's got nice character to it for sure. I don't know how to date these, but like I said, I've been keeping these in the shed here for the last couple of years just to kind of keep them out of the elements. My uncle used these for a couple years to plant. I don't know if he was planting vegetables or using them to plant new nursery stock. After my grandfather quit farming, so he had them for a few years, and they sat outside. He just kept them outside, and I stumbled across them laying in the weeds a couple years ago, and he was willing to let them go. So I figured I'd save them and bring them inside here before any more time passed, and they fell into any worse condition. So these are another project for another day. I think I'll go through them, or have maybe have one of the Amish planter shops go through them and just kind of freshen them up someday when I'm ready to use them. But we'll see what happens. So that's another item on the list, but another cool relic from the family's farming past nonetheless. So anyway, that's just a little look at some old family heirloom farm attachments here, some old big hunks of iron. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and as always, thanks for watching.